Whilst logged onto Archer, in a typical shell session, we use many different commands to do whatever it is we want to do. For example, we use ls to list directory contents, we use cd to change directory, we use mv to move files, we use copy to copy files, we also compile source code using the compiler wrappers, for example cc or ftn, or indeed some of the underlying compilers, gcc, icc, etc. Then we may submit our job script using qsub. Our job script contains aprun statements to run our executables. Once we've submitted our job, we might use qstat to look at the progress of our job, etc. So some of these commands we'll have picked up over the years of using Linux or Unix variant systems. Other commands are somewhat more specific to Archer. The aim of this screencast is to help you access documentation relating really to any of these. So this will be helpful not just for using Archer, but really for using any Linux or indeed any Unix variant system. Now, as opposed to opening up a web browser, for example, and finding a website that has some relevant documentation, this screencast will focus on how to find help directly from the command line. We're going to look at 3 ways of doing this: simple help flags, manual or so-called man pages, and info pages. So if we're in a shell session, for example whilst logged onto Archer, we can type a common command like ls, which lists the directory contents. If we want to find out more about ls, we can pass it the flag --help. If we do that, you can see it prints out some information about ls, namely some usage information, the format of how to use the command, options first and then the name of the file or path which you want to list. Then it prints out a description of what ls does, and then it follows with a list of options that you can pass to ls in 2 formats: a format that is a single hyphen with a single letter and double dash with a word. So for example, there are options like how to colorize the output and how to list subdirectories recursively. And at the end, there are some further notes. So the --help option works for a lot, but not all commands. For example, if we type mv for move, --help, it will give us some similar information, formatted in a similar way. If we're compiling and we're curious about what the compiler wrapper does, cc, we type cc --help. This tells us in a similar format again what some of the options are to cc, what these options do. So this is one way that you can find help. If we look at other commands, for example like qsub, if we try --help for qsub, well, it actually ends up printing out some helpful information, but the --help option itself is not actually explicitly recognized by qsub. It says it's an invalid option, the double dash. So it helpfully does print out what the actual usage should be. In other words, a list of very condensed, concise list of options that are acceptable for qsub. So not all commands have a --help option, but many do. And if you're wondering how to use a command, it's very quick. It's usually your first port of call. So this is the first way that you can quickly find information about how to use a command. Another way to access help about any command that you're using is to use the manual or so-called man pages. These stem from the early history of Unix and have continued to be developed, and they can contain a lot of useful information. They're accessed via a separate command, namely man. So if I type man ls, I'm presented with 2 options. I'm just going to abort this command with Control-C, otherwise it jumps to the first option. So man says that it has found 2 manual pages that match the command ls. They are distinguished by the number appearing in parentheses behind ls. These numbers refer to sections into which the manual was originally divided into categories. If I want to find out more about the manual, I can in fact type man. So there are 3 matching manual pages about the man command, belonging to 3 different sections, 1, 7, and 1p. I'm going to so if I don't do anything, I aborted this command, and if I don't do anything, it will just simply after a few seconds open up the manual page corresponding to the listing with the asterisk, the first listing which is the default one. Or I can just press enter to accept that one. So man, and I press enter to accept that first default. So now I'm shown a separate display of the manual page for the man command. The format of manual pages is somewhat fixed. It starts with the name of the command and a short name, short description, then a synopsis consisting of a listing of the options that can be passed to the command, then a description. And here you see that we are given it a listing of the different numbers and of the manual, of the sections of the manual, and what these correspond to, what types of commands these or what types of things these correspond to. Because there are manual pages corresponding to commands, but also corresponding to libraries or concepts or routines in the kernel, as you see. So not every manual page needs to refer to a specific command. So as it says here, manual pages are conventionally sectioned up according to start to have name, synopsis, other things like description, some options, errors, notes about environment, variables, etc. that influence or have to do with the command or concept listed in this manual page, files, bugs, examples, authors, and a see also section. So if we scroll down, so incidentally, these manual pages can be navigated in various ways. I have mouse input-output translated to my terminal screen. That's why I'm able to scroll. One can use up or down arrow keys, and page up, page down also works. Spacebar will also go page down. Enter goes down successive lines. So we see that we have, after the initial description, we have a list of examples, giving examples how one might use the man command. Then an overview, some notes about defaults. Then an explicit listing of all the flags or the options that can be passed to man. Their short form, one single dash in a letter, and their long form, double dash and a word, and explanations of what all of these do. Then there's a section about exit status of the command, and a section about environment variables that influence or are influenced by this command. For example, there's an environment variable called manPath, which is actually a path or set of paths that are used to find, is used by the man command to actually find man pages in the first place. So we exit. Oh, okay, we'll continue. There's some listing information about files. The see also section has consists of keywords that themselves correspond to manual pages. So if you want to find out more about concepts or commands related to man, you can look at the manual pages for these individual commands. Finally, there's often a note about authors, about who to contact, who's responsible for maintenance, who to contact for bug fixes, etc., etc. Now, to exit a manual page, we type the letter Q. We saw that in the case of man ls, one of the sections was 1p. P stands for POSIX. So this is usually not the manual page that you want, because instead of referring to your particular flavor of Linux that you are running on the machine that you're logged into, it refers to a more generic interface. So usually it's the entry, the manual page that you actually want to look at is not the one that is followed with parentheses, a number, and then P. So if I type man ls again, and now I type, instead of accepting the default, I type 1p, which will take me to that matching manual page. You can see here at the top that it says POSIX Programmer's Manual. So as it warns already, the Linux implementation of this interface may differ for your particular version of Linux. So this is more generic, and this is not generally the manual page that you would want to look at. So I exit with Q. One thing that's very useful to be able to do is to actually find key terms that you're interested in on a manual page. So if I look at the man page for ls, and say I'm interested in changing the color of the output. Now to find any occurrence of the word color in the man page, I type /, which brings up a little box at the bottom here, and I start to type color. I don't know if it's British spelling L-O-U-R or American spelling L-O-R, so I'm just going to leave it at C-O-L-O. Enter, and it will jump to the first matching instance of that expression in the manual page, which tells me, if I scroll up a bit, well, it tells me about the option, one option to do with colorizing the output. It also says more info below. You see it's highlighted the second occurrence as well. To jump from a matching or the third occurrence. Now to jump from one matching occurrence to the next, we use P. If we want to go, we use N. If we want to go to the previous occurrence of this search term, previous match, we use P. So if I type N, jumps to the next in the screen, N, N, N. You see it's now it's jumped down to the bottom of the man page. There's some additional notes here. Okay, so it just tells us some additional information. N, N, N. If I keep on typing N, it just sits there at the end of the end of the page. If I type P, we basically start at the back. So with N and P, I can switch between matching occurrences of this search term. So this is very useful because actually man pages can be quite terse. They are a bit overwhelming if you first look at them, because they contain an entire listing of all the options. They are written very much from the point of view of a programmer who's, well, the developers of the original software of the tool, and also written as almost as a programming reference, as a complete reference, a complete technical reference of how to interface with the command. So it's very useful to be able to find particular things using / and then browsing the file. You may have noticed earlier that when we typed ls-help, the information we were given was actually almost identical to the information contained on the man page for ls. However, usually the man page will contain more information. And indeed, in some cases where the command does not have an option --help, there will be a man page that will give you some kind of information. Now in Archer we often use aprun. So if we type aprun --help, it does give us a very concise list of its usage and options that it will accept with a brief explanation of these options. So this really is useful because it serves as a quick reference to jog our memory. However, if we want more information, and I mean much more information about how exactly to use all of these options, we can look at the man page. So if we type man aprun, we're given two options. We will see if we were to examine closer that these are actually the same man page. So we see a listing of the various options, description of what aprun does, already some examples, bold, information about the computer architecture and how aprun exactly interacts with this. So as I said, man pages can be very very complete and almost over-complete and a bit overwhelming. But say we want to know about a specific thing, say we want to know about CPU binding, and we know that there's an option here, -cc. So we can search for all occurrences of -cc in this man page by doing /-cc, enter. We're going to skip to the next one. So I can go through and encounter the specific description for the option cc, which includes a few examples. And it actually says, for more information, see example 6. I'll keep on typing n, it jumps through all the occurrences. Some more information here. So you see that in one of the other options, namely -d for depth, there is another note referring to -cc, how the depth option interacts with the cc option. So these kinds of things are now at your fingertips. So instead of trying to find documentation from the Cray website and finding the documentation that refers to the exact version that of aprun that is installed in Archer, you can directly access the manual corresponding to the version that's installed in Archer by typing man aprun. So if I continue down through the file, I can see further occurrences, including in the examples lower down. So you see this can be very useful. Okay, that's exhausted the occurrences of -cc. Man pages can help us not just find out more about commands that we already know about, but it can also help us find out what commands exist that we didn't even know about. So if we look at the aprun man page again, and we go to the section See Also, we see that there are a number of commands and concepts listed. So there are a number of manual pages listed which might be useful to looking at. So there's one here called intro alps. So if we quit this man page, we type man intro alps. So intro alps itself is not a command. If I try to autocomplete intro alps, there's no such command. But there is a manual page. If I type man intro alps, it shows that this is actually an introduction to aprun. So this can give you a lot of information about things you didn't even know about. So it's a very useful way. So manual pages are a very useful way to explore and learn more about commands that you know about, but also about related commands. One context in which it can be very valuable to find out more information about a command and about all the options available to that command is when you're compiling. So if you are interested in finding out more about one of the compiler wrappers, for CC for example in Archer, we look at the man page for CC. We see that there are a lot of different entries. Some of them actually refer to matches that are with capital CC, so we don't want those. If we were to look at the first two entries, we would see they are the same. Actually, the first three entries, they're the same. Oops. CC7, if I type in 7, enter, we'll see that this has nothing to do actually with the compiler, but is a separate command. So if I type man cc and accept the first option, I get the man page for the C compiler wrapper. So as the description says, it invokes the C compiler in the currently loaded programming environment, whether that's programmed with Intel, programmed with Cray, or programmed with GNU. And this tells us a lot of useful information about the options available. Now I can also look at the man page directly for one of the underlying compilers, for example GCC. This tells us, gives us a big list of options, massive list of options for GCC. And again, we can search through this to find out what particular options do. For example, if we're interested in what a particular optimization level does, we can do /-o and press N to go through occurrence as well. That's not very useful. We type -o3, for example, as a search term. Right. So then we get a useful match, the section of the manual page that refers to optimizations, starting from here. So it tells us what kind of options the following optimization flags turn on: O1, O2, and O3, O0, and OS. And again, as opposed to looking up these things on a website, or where you might not be certain that you are finding documentation that refers to the exact version that you're compiling with, if the system has been set up correctly on the machine that you're logged into, the manual page that you get is the one that corresponds exactly to the version of the command, in this case the version of the compiler that is installed and that you're actually using to compile your software. So that's very valuable. If I look at the man page for the Intel C compiler, ICC, it says there's no manual entry for ICC. Now this is something that's important to be aware of on Archer, namely that some manual pages do not become available until the relevant module has been loaded, the relevant environment module. So for example, at the moment, progenv cray is loaded by default. So if I do module swap progenv cray to progenv Intel, and then do man ICC, I am able to access the manual page for the Intel C++ compiler. So the reason for that is, if I look at what the progenv Intel module actually does a number of things. One of the things it does is load the Intel module. If I look at what the Intel module does by doing module show Intel, namely it sets man path. The man path, if you recall from earlier, is the environment variable which dictates where the man command looks to find manual pages for the relevant command. So that after this path, which is for the particular version of the Intel compiler environment that is installed, once that path has been added to man path, then the man command, man ICC, will find the manual page corresponding exactly to that version of the compiler. So we've seen how useful man pages are. One final way of finding help that I'd like to describe is to use info pages. Info pages are kind of a GNU-specific alternative to man pages. They're accessed via a separate command called info. So if I type info ls, you will see quite a large description. If we scroll down, we again see the listing of the options. So this is similar to, but not exactly the same as, the information that we got when we typed ls-help or when we accessed the man page on ls. So info pages are typically more wordy and less condensed, less overwhelming. Perhaps they're perhaps slightly more casual, slightly more useful to read as a first introduction. If we look at the info page for GCC, we see that this can lead us to a number of sections describing in some detail the GCC compiler suite. So again, we can navigate with mouse or with page up, page down, left, right to go through different sections. So you see these are much more like so the info pages are typically much more like a longer kind of user guide, whereas the man pages are more fixed format, slightly more concise technical description. If I look at the man page for GCC, you can see that it's different. There's an aprun. So if I type info aprun, that will actually give me the same as man aprun. There's really actually no difference. So in some case, info simply gives us the same as the man page. Okay, so hopefully knowing about these ways to get help directly from the command line about commands that either you use on a daily basis already or commands that you're newly starting to use will help you really become a lot more confident in doing your work, and also help you become more of a power user and explore the options available to you. This should be helpful not only on Archer, but on any Linux machine.